along the way, I would find friends that had similar skills, I would say, like drawing skills, and we would group up and try to make comic books and shit like that during my childhood. Like, I always knew that I could use my skills to do something in the future, but I never thought of it as like a serious thing until I wanted to get out of normal studying and all that.
It's a familiar story. A kid finds a creative outlet, works at it, and grows up to be a world-famous artist. Well, not quite so fast. Bert Youn, whose work you might be familiar with if you've watched Adventure Time on Cartoon Network, was certainly a talented drawer as a kid. But the story of an artist finding career success is rarely a squeaky clean 3-act narrative that ends according to plan. From the very beginning, Bert's encountered obstacles of varying sizes.
My family members were all doctors, and my dad was an engineer. He went to a good school, so there was always this pressure towards me with studying and being good at it, but I wasn't, and I hated it. I always drew. That kind of led me into rebelling against my parents, saying, hey, enough of this, I'm going to art school.
While it seems like the typical story of a family full of professionals against a kid that just wants to make cartoons, Bert was fortunately able to make his decision and follow through with it. With his mind made up, the search for schools began, and along with it, the decision on what to major in. He landed on Cal Arts, which was founded by Disney and therefore highly specialized in animation. Animation, specifically, is the art of creating and depicting motion over the course of multiple frames. Cartoons, generally speaking, are two-dimensional drawings that are often an exaggerated representation of reality. These 2D drawings can be animated, as can 3-dimensional objects, computer-generated or otherwise. But back to Bert's story.
So when applying, I wasn't really expecting to get in. And when I did, I was like, oh, well, I guess I could try animation, and this is what I was into, come to think of it. I grew up with classic Disney animation films, and that's something that I was really into at the time. And knowing that the school was founded by Disney, that was the route that I took. And getting into the school, getting to learn about fascinating things about animation definitely got me into it a lot more.
After finishing his 3rd year, his first big step into the industry would present itself. Recruiters visited the school to attend a screening and to connect with fresh young talent like Bert.
They saw my film, they liked it. They were asking me what kind of field I would want to get into if I pursue my career towards animation, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. Like, I'm into everything. I'm into filmmaking in general. I'm into telling stories through my drawings, but if I get a job, I need to choose like a very specific field. Do I want to animate? Do I want to storyboard? Do I want to write? Do I want to design characters, props? I didn't know.
Faced with so many possible directions in a field he was passionate about, he left his decision to the gods, or in this case, the people at Pixar. And so, Bert interned as an animator at Pixar, known for the Toy Story series, Finding Nemo, and Inside Out, among countless others. But as many know, Pixar has always been about making films using CG animation. Traditional animation was about frame-by-frame drawings of 2D characters, often overlaid on a pre-drawn background. 3D animation, on the other hand, involves taking pre-made character models and rigging them with skeletons. This allows the model to be manipulated over the course of several frames to depict motion. Bert compares the process to something like puppeteering. And with every opportunity and years spent in the field, you tend to find out more about what it is you want and where you want to go. Bert would later find that out as he progressed through his internship.
I was at Pixar as an animator, and I found out that I don't like being in front of the computer all the time. I needed to be drawing. So I went back to school. For my senior year, I made a film that was more towards storytelling and storyboarding and writing. So after my last year film, I went into Disney as a storyboard apprentice, which means you work with a mentor there to become a storyboard artist at a studio. Storyboarding is more close to filmmaking because you're like boarding out the entire film, you're boarding out scenes, you're choosing shots and camera moves, and you also get to write.
Following his apprenticeship with Disney, his newfound direction would land him a job storyboarding and writing on Cartoon Network's hit show Adventure Time. However, in 2009, life would throw him both a curveball and a means of escape. He was drafted into the Korean military.
This happened in 2009. This was after being in animation for 3 years. I was working on a show called Adventure Time over at Cartoon Network. And around that time, I was visiting my parents out in Korea for Christmas. As I was going through immigrations, they were asking me if I had a Korean name, and I told them who I was, and they checked something off a list they had. And when I got home, the Department of Manpower of Korea or something like that, calling my mom, saying that they were noticed that I entered the country, and now it's time for me to go into the army and serve for 2 years.
A trip to see his parents in South Korea turned out to be so much more. The prospect of serving in the army of a country that's technically still at war with North Korea doesn't sound very appealing.
I was like, fuck no, I'm not gonna go through that. I'm a US citizen, why do I need to go through this? And apparently, the law in Korea constantly changes to prevent from all these dual citizens to avoid the duty.
The complexities of dual US-Korean citizenship withstanding, Bert was faced with the dilemma.
I was stuck, pretty much. I couldn't give up my Korean citizenship, but eventually decided not to go back to the States because I didn't want to go back to my job, and I felt like this would be an opportunity to open up other things for me.
Now, despite what the greater public might fear about serving in the army, there are all kinds of roles that don't necessarily involve being on the front lines.
There's so much bullshit, so there's a lot of frustration while you're in there. But for me, it was that thing where you just needed to just empty your head and just follow what they needed me to do and just empty my thoughts and just move along.
While Bert was dealt a significantly better hand than he could have been, the military experience was by no means easy. Bert's decisions tested him. It led him to detours that pushed him to unexpected and unplanned destinations. Taking advantage of his time and soul allowed him the chance to align with friends and start something of his own.
I ended up opening up a design studio / animation studio that focused on design, filmmaking, any type of film content. Luckily, I had some friends out there that were into the idea of what we wanted to do. So a few friends, 4 including me, kind of grouped up and got an office space in Seoul.
For Bert and his friends, it was a meaningful outlet, given the state of the Korean animation industry.
Korea has always been known as the country that does all the animation for all these American TV shows. So it's a lot of grunt work, not too much creativity involved with it. Everything coming out, we're just still stuck in the 90s. And I know a lot of friends that wanted to pursue an animation, but because of the industry being this way, a lot of people would lose interest and eventually get into either design, product design, graphic design, or fine arts.
It's an especially unforgiving path for an artist, particularly one that wants to see a craft advance beyond what the industry it's in will accept and pay for.
I mean, until now, I'm still struggling to get a show greenlit. In animation, the only way to do your own thing, to produce something 100% you, is very, very difficult. You either need to have a studio back you up to create your own show, or go completely independent and do smaller scale stuff.
Bert describes the constant battle shared by creatives of all walks, one that will test that very passion to create. There's serving personal creative freedom and exploration of the art, and there's serving and surviving the industry built around that particular art. In the case of the latter, Authentic creation is hard enough when you're independent or even doing work for a client. What's worse is when the potential of a project is stifled by the rigid hierarchy of a company.
It's painful to see all these people that are so talented working on shit shows.
For all of his honesty, Bert gives an unflinching perspective of his side of the creative industries, one that's always badly needed. It's a constant reminder that for those inclined, yes, it can be a simple matter of pushing hard and pushing straight up for years. You can keep climbing the ladder of a company that has the rungs and funds to accommodate your growth and your ambitions. But for many creatives like Bert, the path to a very personal sense of success and achievement is never a straight line. There will be moments of great clarity, but there will inevitably also be forks, obstacles, and complete dead ends too. But if there's a good story to tell, or many, an artist will stay alive long enough to tell it. They might have to change gears and make a career pivot to stay afloat, both financially and motivationally, but that passion will always endure in some form. In Bert's case, he's perhaps realized his passion doesn't have to be actualized in a single field.
My conclusion was that, hey, if you tell an interesting story, you can draw people into anything. That is the same thing with films, animation, design, products. It related to everything. To me, story became everything. And that's how I wanted to start a retail that focused more on storytelling.
Now, retail might seem like a complete 180 with regards to his creative ambitions, but if anything, it's one of those very pivots. He hasn't abandoned animation. He's both currently developing a show of his own, while also helping a friend at Cartoon Network. In the meantime, his entry into retail with The Good Liver is an outlet for many of the stories he's encountered. Stories picked up while traveling to Japan and backpacking through Europe. And that's the simple magic of good storytelling. All the artistic elements can fit the story like a glove. But if the story that makes those elements effective is weak, or not even worth telling, it'll lose the audience. Bert makes a good point about the common pitfalls with current visual storytelling.
There's so many films that are shot so well, designed so well, and composed so well, but if the story sucks, you're not going to be interested in it. Same thing with our products. It's interesting to see how people, come in and see our objects that we sell and be really into the design, but not quite into it to buy it. Once you start telling about the story and the important facts of the object, the history behind it, they immediately get into it and it completely changes the product for them. It sits in their mind in a complete different way once the story is told.
It's an apt comparison. The story does change the perceived value of the work. Sure, with most mainstream Hollywood-produced comedies, the audience can suspend disbelief and chuckle along. Human stories can be stylized representations of reality. However, they will be picked to pieces if they try to present themselves as anything resembling serious cinema. A forceful but underinvested actor as the main character? A gaping plot hole? A jarring cut? All of these can bring an audience out of a story. Animation and cartoons can similarly fall victim to their own aspirations. All the eye-popping effects in the world can't emotionally sell the viewer. But when things click, it's absolutely captivating. Cartoons and animation can tell a story that is unflinchingly real, even if the images are far from the truth. They have a unique tendency to crush our misgivings. We stop thinking about them as being just for kids and allow them to speak directly to our emotions. Animated films will, if given the chance, drop uncontrollable feelings of sadness, anger, or sympathy for characters and their struggles, sometimes more than any live-action film could. And when it does this, it leaves audiences moved and with a profound respect for the work they've just experienced. It's something Bert wants to leave his audience with after they've heard the stories he has to share, whether it's from an animated story or the one behind an item from his shop.
It's the feeling that you get once you finish a film and screening that to the audience and getting positive feedback. People are shedding tears, they're laughing at the jokes that you created. That's the most rewarding thing for me as an animator. I think the store kind of brings that experience in a way where I could tell little stories here and there and like changing people's mind. I felt a very similar feeling to it.